I'm looking at I'm looking at the next page, and there's a note about evaluators and program administrators need to keep these things in mind when launching and evaluating new programs. And again, these are just things to consider. I'm not going to read through all of them. You can do that, but a few things really stood out to me. So one was complex treatments increase the risk of fidelity degradation. Sounds so fancy, fidelity degradation. But what does that mean? It just means that you're not going to stick to what you were supposed to do. And so the program I think about when I came out right out of the MSW program, there were so many pieces to it. No wonder, there were so many components within the institution, outside, afterwards, and aftercare. There were so many things going on that, in hindsight, again, I knew just enough to be dangerous, that it would have been a challenge for anyone, but particularly to keep that stuff in mind. So the more complex the program, the more likely it is there are to be problems. There's just more pieces to the puzzle. Client considerations, this is a good one. Angry and hostile clients can prevent the implementation of plan strategies. Another thing I was thinking about is if you don't do what you said you were going to do, like if you say, once you finish this treatment, you will be released from our care, and that doesn't happen, you may have some pissed off clients, understandably so, and they may talk to other potential or future clients, and how does that affect those future classes of whatever your intervention is. And the other thing to note, client acceptability of treatment has been found to be associated with more favorable outcomes. That kind of makes sense. If somebody's cool with what's going on, that they're going to be more favorable outcomes. They're not so upset by it. So that to me makes sense. And then some therapist considerations, and this has definitely been my experience. Treatment outcome may be influenced by the motivation and acceptability of the procedures by the therapist. And so you really need to get buy-in, not just from the administration, but also, from the people that are actually delivering services, from maybe clerical staff who are entering the data. You have got to get that buy-in. And so that means, making nice with people and helping explain, here's the purpose, here's what we're doing. And then something else, which this seems kind of intuitive, that the training level of therapists is associated with increased therapeutic efficacy. So if you've got some clinical social workers providing services versus somebody who has just an undergrad degree in, biology. Not that there's anything wrong with biology, but you may not be as qualified to be providing human services. There's just some specific training you may not have. So those are things to talk about. And then there's a section, and then I'm moving on. Just, again, I'm looking through the text, Fidelity Nightmares, and I love that there's this article, The Family Preservation Evaluation from Hell. It's a beautiful title. So, and I think part of that is because these are things that happen. So you can read about the horror stories. I have my own, a few I've told you of, but you can kind of look through that. Something that happened to me, again, I learned so much from this first experience, was that all of the staff got pissed off at me, and there's some background there. I don't think I necessarily did anything. It might have been what I didn't do, which I wasn't as present. Again, I didn't see this at the time, but it's awesome when you're trying to evaluate a program and no one will speak to you. So again, painful learning experiences can be really helpful, because you can be darn sure that, the next time it's like I am present, I'm making sure I'm communicating with people and things like that. And I'm there more frequently. One thing I have always thought about is, I wish we had been at the institution more. That would have made a lot of difference in a lot of different ways. Okay, program drift. Some of that is the program starts off as one thing, and then over time it may change, either because the staff changes, people forget what the original goal was. You could have different providers. You might have different, satellite offices that are farther away from headquarters. All those things are challenges to treatment fidelity. And then politics, which I've definitely had experience with. These people outside my office need to shut up. Anyway, politics. You can be seen as the enemy. You have come in to evaluate this program, and so that's part of why you really need to make nice with people. Nice is a technical term. To explain, here's the purpose, and to talk to as many people as possible to get a full picture of what's going on. Something else I've experienced, and this makes sense, particularly, well, I mean, as an external evaluator, where you're not part of the agency you're evaluating. Well, even if you're an internal evaluator, there may be pressure from the administration to actually make things look better than they are. And so that can be a challenge, and I've definitely had the experience of people not being happy with findings. And in fact, in one case, this was during my MSW program, they just didn't publish the findings. I mean, the report was just ignored. So that can happen. Again, communication is really important. I like what your textbook talks about. It talks about under politics and okay, I like this. Guidelines for evaluation in politically charged arenas. And these are some really nice pointers, I thought, about maintaining your independence. And so to have a contract or a memorandum of understanding, which sounds a little less threatening, but that way you can talk about here's the focus and the purpose of the evaluation, what the start and end dates are, what kind of methods you'll be using to evaluate, or if you're going to, what data you're going to use, staff, or there'll be a pre-test, post-test, to be very clear about that, the budget, and then also to make sure you have ownership of the data and the ability to, you have editorial authority. So all those things are important. So I think that's very helpful to remember, to go in there with that plan. And the other thing is, you do want to obtain information when you're evaluating a program from as many different sources as you can. So you may get to talk to clients, administrators, people delivering, the service, actually, frontline social workers or whoever it is, to get a full picture. And also, again, I keep coming back to this, explain and communicate the purpose of the evaluation and its methodology to staff and anybody else that needs to know. To be very clear about that, to answer questions. This is where you get to use your social work skills and just be really patient with people and very clear, very transparent about what's going on. So those are, I can't emphasize those enough. Just, again, based on my experience and then reading this chapter, I'm like, yep. So it's nice to know you're not alone, but it is a lot of work. And then your textbook, something else they say, and this is, I get this, it's a little intimidating, but it says, page 332, where possible, assume as much responsibility as you can handle, and some of that so that you can monitor all of these details. So in some of the cases, a lot of times I've worked with a team, so you can divide up those responsibilities, but it is big work for sure. The last section of the chapter, which is something really important to consider also, is culturally sensitive evaluations, and you can read that in more detail, but two of the biggest things that stood out to me, and that based on my experience, kind of one of those things about, I wish I'd done that differently. And this may seem common sense, but I want to read it anyway. It says, naturally, we tend to assume that others think the way we do, know what we do, but this is an error evaluators should not make. And I think that assumption is so subtle sometimes we don't even know we're doing it until somebody says something or does something, you're like, what? So they make some nice examples about, we're used to Likert scales. If you've been to college, you have to take all these tests. That's not very foreign to you, but to somebody maybe without a college education or something, or maybe just from another culture, they don't really get that and they don't want to fill it out and it doesn't make sense to them. So the authors of this text make a really important point. Involving others who don't share the evaluator's same cultural experiences in the evaluation process, as well as pilot testing, procedures, and instructions with groups of clients who resemble the target population, are great ways to avoid the problem of being culturally insensitive. So those are some things to consider. So if you can construct an evaluation team that's ethnically diverse, that's really ideal. I have wondered in some cases, I think about a particular program where the whole evaluation team was white, and all of the folks at the program were African American, and there's definitely some stuff going on there. I'm not exactly sure what, but there's definitely some stuff going on there. So I think those are things to consider. So again, there's a lot more in this chapter. Those are kind of some of the highlights for you to think about. How does this fit, with what you're being asked to do in this class, but also, how can this inform what you do in the future? So hopefully this has been helpful. If not, well, too bad. Okay.